Hi, I'm Ryan, and I have a rare disorder. I don't feel pain. I didn't always know this, though. Here's how it all started. My parents thought I was the most perfect baby in the world. Why? I rarely ever cried. I was laughing most of the time and only broke into tears when I was hungry or needed my diaper changed. My parents' friends who also had babies were so envious that my parents were able to get a full 8 hours of sleep each night. One funny story that my dad tells everyone over dinner is that when I was a toddler, I was playing in the dirt outside. He heard me laughing uncontrollably, so he came to see what could have been so amusing about a pile of dirt. When he looked at me, he gasped. I had a huge scorpion in my hands, and I was just playing with it like it was a teddy bear. He also says I had a huge red mark on my leg where it had stung me. He screamed at me to drop it, then picked me up and ran into the house. I was still laughing, apparently. My parents took me to the doctor to check if I was okay, and I was. However, no one could understand why I wasn't screaming in pain. I had 2 older brothers who were always pushing each other around, and when I was big enough to play their wrestling and boxing games, they included me too. They were always hitting or punching me, and instead of crying, I just hit and punched back harder. They'd often stop the games because they were in so much pain. I found it all amusing because I felt nothing. When I was about 6, my family and I were on the beach, and my mom got a sea urchin stuck in her foot. She screamed and shouted in pain. Then she burst into tears. My father tried to pull it out, but the more he tried, the more it hurt. I really couldn't understand why it affected my mother so much, so I went into the sea and caught another sea urchin. I dropped it onto the sand and jumped on it. It tickled. "Mom, this is fun. Why are you crying?" I said. "Oh my God, Ryan," she said. We both had urchins stuck in our feet. I was giggling and my mom was crying. My poor dad had to deal with it all. He drove us to the hospital where they helped us to remove the spikes. For my mother, this seemed unbearable, but it didn't affect me at all. And I guess that is when I realized I was a bit different. I decided to use this difference to my advantage. At school, I developed the nickname Fearless because I was always doing the most outrageous stunts. I'd climb to the top of the monkey bars and deliberately throw myself down. Or I'd swing really high, then just jump off midair. One day, I brought a lighter to school and tried to impress a girl by burning my finger. It was so much fun. But I have to warn you, don't try any of this at home, or anywhere for that matter. I got into trouble for this because eventually the other kids wanted to attempt my stunts. When they did, they'd end up in excruciating pain with broken limbs. It got so bad that my parents were called into a meeting and I was expelled for being a bad influence. At my new school, I became a bully because I was angry that those stupid boys from my other school got me in trouble. I became the most feared boy at school, and people would think twice before crossing my path. The bigger boys in the higher grades tried to mess with me once, but I beat them up so badly that they learned to stay away from me. They were so shocked when I only laughed at them while they punched and kicked me. I have to admit that part of me really loved the attention and respect. I would do things just for the thrill and attention. For example, one afternoon, my parents decided they'd take us kids out to enjoy a cool stroll in the zoo. After laughing at the penguins and observing the zebras, I began to feel a bit bored. As we approached the lion's pit, I got a bright idea. Ryan, no!" my mom screamed, but it was too late. I had already jumped in. I walked around making funny faces at the lions while the crowd screamed for me to get out. Many people had already taken out their phones and they were recording. I ignored them because there was a cute little lion cub approaching me. I ran towards it and picked it up. Suddenly, I heard more shouting. "Ryan, look out!" my dad said. Before I could even turn around, a lioness, the cub's mother I guess, jumped on my back and bit my arm. I turned around and pried her jaws apart with my bare arms. Then I laughed and hopped out of the lion's pit. I was bleeding, but I seemed totally unbothered by the whole incident. I went viral that same afternoon. Everyone was talking about me. In the weeks that followed, I became so popular that I was invited by several talk show hosts to talk on their shows. It was all the attention I'd been craving, and more. As a teenager, I continued participating in extreme sports. I got tired of the bully reputation, so when I moved to high school, I hung out with the tough kids who were also into extreme sports. We called ourselves the Daredevils, and every other week we'd try a different challenge. We went mountain biking, paragliding, skydiving, and base jumping, but my ultimate favorite was cliff diving. I loved the adrenaline rush I'd get while falling through the air and then crashing on the sea. Unlike my friends, I had absolutely no fear. One afternoon on one of our cliff diving adventures, I had an experience that influenced the rest of my life. It was just like any ordinary day, but while making silly gestures on a cliff, I ended up losing my balance. Instead of falling into the sea, I hit the rocks and I ended up breaking both my arm and my leg. I only knew this because this is what the x-rays at the hospital revealed. I felt completely fine. Luckily, my problem could be easily fixed, but the doctors were extremely puzzled about why I seemed to feel no pain at all. Although I could have been discharged earlier, they decided to keep me longer. Several tests were conducted, and after that, they did several more. After what seemed like weeks, they called me and my parents to a meeting. Many doctors were present, and everyone looked at me like I was some sort of alien. The head doctor looked at my parents and said, "This is something we've never seen before at our hospital. Your son Ryan is incapable of feeling pain," he said. "What?" my dad said. "Think about the way he has behaved his whole life. I'm pretty sure there were many clear indicators, but now that we've done the tests, we know for sure," replied the doctor. "Well, there was the scorpion sting when he was a baby, and he never cried when his brothers hit him, and he'd do all kinds of crazy stunts in elementary school. Then the lion." My dad went blank for a while, and then it all clicked. "Well, Ryan needs to be extremely careful because he is unable to feel pain. He seems to constantly put himself in life-threatening situations. He will do things that ordinary humans would probably think twice about attempting. Think about it. He could have killed himself while jumping off that cliff," he said. "Our suggestion is that he stops engaging in dangerous sports. Can you just calm down and behave like a normal young man for a while?" he said while looking at me. "I don't really care what any of you have to say," I said while walking out of the room and slamming the door. I was angry. How dare they all talk about me like that while I was right in the room? I loved my life, and I loved the adrenaline rush I felt when I took risks. I wasn't about to put myself in a bubble just because I couldn't feel pain. Instead of persuading me to be careful, the doctor's revelation caused me to feel like I was superior to everyone else. I decided to use my ability to make money. I started making videos while I hurt myself to see if I could get lots of views on YouTube. I did everything I could think of. I stuck needles in my hands, smashed bricks on my head, and one time I even set myself on fire. People were horrified, but I found it hilarious. I gained more and more views and more followers. When I finally hit 1 million, I felt the greatest sense of accomplishment I had ever felt in my life. I also continued my dangerous stunts, and when I was old enough to drive, I did every single thing I was told not to do in driving school. I also bought a motorbike, which became my favorite thing in the universe. I learned how to do many stunts, and of course, I did them all without a helmet. This was the worst mistake, and maybe I should have cared and listened to my mom when she begged me to wear it. One night, while I was biking through the mountains and testing out some stunts all by myself, my lights stopped working. It didn't bother me much, but I decided I should try to head back home. I went speeding through the mountains back to the town. I really enjoyed feeling the breeze through my hair. I didn't think that speeding was a bad idea because these roads were usually clear at night. Suddenly, I saw a bright white light and heard a huge bang. Then, everything went black. I woke up to a masked face staring directly at me. I looked around and realized I was in an operating room. I looked at my body and realized I had many cuts all over. The surgeons were trying to stitch me back together, and it looked really gross. I didn't feel anything, but just seeing myself like that really upset me. I was given a few sleeping pills, and when I woke up hours later, my parents were sitting by my side. "Oh, Ryan, my love, what have you done to yourself now?" my mom said while wiping the tears off her face. "What do you mean, Mom? I just feel a bit drowsy, but I'm perfectly fine," I said while trying to sit up. But I couldn't move. I tried and tried again, but nothing worked. "What happened to me?" I asked. "You were in a really horrible accident. You are paralyzed from the waist down, and you might be confined to a wheelchair for the next 3 years, honey," my mom said. "But that can't be. I didn't feel anything," I said, shocked. At that moment, the doctor walked in. "Although you don't feel anything, you have badly injured yourself. Your body needs time to heal. After 2 or 3 years, we'll get started with the physical therapy to help you walk again. But you will never be the same. I'm sorry," he said. I sighed and thought that I should have listened to them when they asked me to be more careful. I was filled with regrets. I now have 1 year left to go, and I'm really hoping that I'll be able to stand soon. Although I still can't feel pain, I feel humiliated and frustrated like this. I should have made better decisions, and when I get out of this wheelchair, I will stop seeking attention and I will try to be a lot more careful.